Looks like we're being live streamed, people. Let me pull it up. My channel. So we got possible. I know people aren't here yet, but hopefully it won't be just me. Dan said he could probably make it. Chase said he might be able to make it, but if you do, it'll be in a little bit. Some stuff came up. So we'll just get started. Didn't want to keep you fine, ladies and gentlemen, waiting when I could just get on here and blab my fat mouth about whatever. Cool. Good to know it's coming in loud and clear. And bad news is I didn't get my memes together in time, so there won't be any memes tonight. But I like to have clusters of epic meme dumps as opposed to trickling them out, build up the audience suspense and then hammer you guys with spicy meme content every few weeks or so. And I feel like they just get spicier and spicier every day. So one day the memes are going to be my downfall, probably. Like I was saying, we will have Dan or Che, hopefully both, do it live coming in, but they just might be a few minutes late. You know how it is in Canada. Time goes differently there. Every Canadian minute is only worth like 60% of an American minute, I think, is the exchange rate. How you doing, George Orwell? A few people build up. Tonight we're going to be talking about, I don't have a hugely specific agenda, but I do want to talk about all the different countries around the world that are just continually ditching the dollar. And it seems like it's picking up pace because I know, laminated memes will be the new currency. Seriously, if we had a EMP or something, there will be legitimate meme historians scraping the wasteland for evidence of the memes of the past world. But there's a lot of countries that are dropping the dollar very rapidly. I know there's some people who, it's weird because, I've talked to people before who think that America's going to not just recover, but come out the other side of all this stuff even stronger than before. And of course, that's one possibility. But it's weird because all of these people who think that usually tend to think that there will be a currency crisis at some point, that the dollar eventually will not be the reserve currency anymore. Like Willian says, historically speaking, we are long overdue for monetary system change. I think it's more like every 80 years, not 40 years, but regardless, we're like at the limit. I think it's 80, 85 years, if I'm not mistaken, is like the kind of the life cycle of the global reserve currency. Because it wasn't always the US. It was the England at one time. There was all sorts of other things or other countries that had that capability. So it's weird to see people think like, oh yeah, this will happen eventually, and be like, okay, well, let's step back and think about that. Like, if we accept this is going to happen eventually, what would have to happen first? What would it look like if we were getting to that point where it was going to happen? And pretty much anything anyone would say about what the world would look like and what sort of things would start happening when that was, imminent, those are the things that are happening now. And someone had said, I forget who it was recently, can't remember, had said that, like, yes, there will be a reserve currency change, but that takes decades. And I'm like, right. And it's the clock started from when the last one switched, not from when people actively started ditching the currency to the quote unquote reserve currency to use other methods and other currencies. That's not the start of the clock. That's the end game. Right. Sold it first and then all at once. And I still think the all at once phase might take years, but I do definitely think absolutely that we're down to years, not decades, like single digit years, if we even have that. Certainly it's something that could happen very, very quickly, could take 5+ years to really work out, depending on how it goes, depending on what goes on with, if magically the conflict in Russia and Asia kind of ended, then it might peter on a little bit longer, depending on how it ends. Or if it explodes, then it could end almost instantly. So we're already seeing people move away from that. And with these leaks, one of the interesting things that came out of these leaks is that the Pentagon leaks is how much we're like spying on our quote unquote allies and things like that, which we knew that stuff was happening. And this is what I was going back to in my last live stream that I did, was talking about how I think a lot of Americans don't appreciate how annoyed the rest of the world gets with the way that America has been doing things and just basically straight up bullying everyone and treating even our allies, is that people don't want to necessarily be in that position. So given any opportunity to move away from that, it's a lot of these countries and a lot of these governments are going to try and take that. So we've seen, I think Brazil is the one that's talking about it. Even Mexico has mentioned things like that. We already have, obviously, like I said, Brazil and the other BRICS nations are actively moving away from it. The only thing we don't know for sure is what's going to be taking its place. We have, so far, these countries are talking about unilateral trade deals in their own currency. I think they're going to make a basket, probably some kind of commodities related currency. It would seem weird to me in this environment of every single worldwide fiat currency kind of losing money or losing value at the same time, that they would just switch to another completely fiat that makes currency. It's possible, but I think it's much more likely that whoever switches to any sort of backed currency, excuse me, it doesn't have to be gold. I don't think it will be gold specifically, but it might be. But I think it might be commodity backed. And any one of these Arab countries or Venezuela or whatever could make an oil backed currency, like Saudi Arabia, whatever. They'll make something, anything that's like redeemable that has some sort of physical value attached to it will instantly be like an anchor point against which all other fiat currencies are measured and shown for how worthless they really are. So it could put us in a really weird situation if someone decides to do that. And that's honestly a lot of what the American foreign policy has been over the years, been preventing that, like with Libya, with Iraq. It's never really been just about the oil, it's more about the monetary system that they're defending. And I think that's why they're fighting so hard against Russia and in Ukraine, because it's not about Ukraine. It's about stopping anyone who's trying to go away from the system. And we sort of like overplayed our hand by kicking Russia out of all this stuff, thinking that it would destroy them, because now they're free basically, and everyone else can look and see what it's like to not have to be into this central banking reserve currency petrodollar model that everyone's kind of been stuck in. Like, you're not allowed to leave, and the punishment if you try is we kick you out. Like, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, SPQR says maybe an entirely new currency is intended to facilitate trade. Right, yeah, like a basket of BRICS currencies makes it more stable. It's already includes all of them, so you don't have to do different types of conversions, or it could be something specific, like a specific commodity or basket of commodities. It might be some form of cryptocurrency. Like I said, I don't know if they'll use gold specifically, but that could be included. It could be a basket of multiple commodities as well. Like I do think that they'll probably try to put some kind of backing to it, because if anyone comes out with a usable currency that's backed by any commodity, even if it's not one that's particularly like valuable per unit like gold is, like oil is still relatively cheap even at the current prices, but just knowing that this currency is worth a specific amount of something gives it an inherent value that will show the decline of all the other currencies. Right now, like even on the forex markets and stuff, when one currency goes down, all the currencies are inflationary, all the major ones anyway. So you don't really see the effect of it as badly or as obviously as you would if any of them were not, or once one of them becomes not. But once one does, anyone, then you'll see how rapidly these other ones are declining. And that'll be a weird time. And it's interesting to see that the production that I've talked about, because when I was on JJ's live stream, we were talking about how I think we're like 10 years away from actually replacing all our overseas manufacturing, and at least completely, even though we're starting to do that now. Like we're so far off. And also people don't realize the extent to which we export like pollution to China and to India and all these other countries. Like, we can't even do the things the same way here. So not only would it be more expensive just because of the more labor and all that stuff, like the higher labor, excuse me, in paying, Americans to do the things instead of paying some Chinese sweatshop paying them, that like they're just dumping stuff in rivers. Don't have the same safety protocols. They don't have the same rules regarding overtime and all this other stuff. So it's going to be way more expensive, even if you can build out all that stuff here. And that's why we were paying companies overseas to do it anyways, because they could do it so much cheaper. So even if we can replace that stuff here in the time frame that these people think, which I don't think is true. I think we're, like I said, years away from actually replacing it. And it'll still have to be in other countries, or else the cost will be way expensive anyway. And another one that people don't seem to recognize, which I think I also mentioned last week, is that we have all the resources here, but so does Russia. Like Russia is in a very good spot when it comes to natural resources, and they have all these reasons about why Russia is sucking. Like, oh, they can't do this, they can't do that, they need us, they need this. It's like, well, why wouldn't we have all those problems too? Just because we have all these natural resources, Russia does too. Russia has massive amounts of natural resources, and that's one of the reasons why China is keen on hooking up with them, because they can, between, especially once they take over Ukraine, they have arable land that can produce massive amounts of wheat, something like 20% of the world's wheat was produced in those two countries. They have massive amounts of physical, like minerals, metals, rare earth minerals, things like that. And China's been stockpiling food as well. So yes, they don't produce, they import a lot of food, but they do produce a lot of food. And they also have been stockpiling a mad amount of food. Whereas in America, our supplies of like critical, they're already using up our strategic reserves. That's what I meant, not critical, excuse me. Strategic supplies of food and energy are like non-existent. They've been using them up already just to keep prices down. And now they've been giving all of our military supplies to Ukraine to the point where we're having to borrow, like loan 155 millimeter artillery shells from the South Koreans because we can't produce them fast enough. And we're like running out. It's just absurd, totally absurd. And everyone sees this around the world. So everyone's moving away. How you doing? Manufacturing being moved to Indonesia. Ford just made the statement weeks ago. They're moving there. Yeah, they're moving things to South America. They're moving to Indonesia. It is happening, and that's good because it needs to happen. More of it should be moved back into the country, not just to other Southeast Asian countries. But we are moving away from China. But we're, like I said, we're still years away. Like you can't just build up a factory overnight to replace everything that China does. The largest producer of noble gases. Yeah, they produce a lot over there, and I'm sure they're not producing as much right now. But things like helium and maybe argon and whatever I forget which ones are all the noble gases. But helium, hydrogen, right? Stuff like that. I think we will see currencies that say they're backed by something, but it will be bogus. I can claim my currency is backed by platinum. Yeah, true. I mean, we can get the banking models of all kinds usually turn out to be adulterated in some way. But even if it's claiming to be backed by, just like with a normal banking, if everyone thinks their money's there and anytime people go to get it, unless there's a run, they can, it's still going to become more valuable than just a random debt-based fiat currency. Remembers the Gulf of Mexico offshore oil and gas boom of the 80s. Yeah, most of that really easy to mine and process resources are gone now, like the oil. They're not having to get into like the shale oil and gas and things like that. Allegedly, we still have a lot that we could get in Alaska and whatnot. There's some other country that supposedly has like some massive amount of natural gas, untapped natural gas. It was totally random, but I forget what it was. But yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions, the topics you guys want to go over. I'm still usually trying to focus on the dollar because that's something that's happening currently. It's weird. We feel like we've been in a kind of a weird lull with the war in Ukraine. I wouldn't be surprised to see pretty much anything happen at this point. We kept hearing about a Ukrainian offensive. That seems to have maybe gotten stalled out by the release of data, of the Pentagon's internal data about the war. And I've heard some weird stuff, people claiming that the Pentagon is actually in the dark on a lot of it, and just kind of having to go off of whatever information they're getting from the Zelensky regime, and they're not necessarily like 100% in control. They're just, so I don't know what to make of that. Not sure if that's true. Yeah, Sam Bankman-Fried was not the first crypto liar, and he won't be the last. Yeah, crypto is one of those things that you have to separate the technology and the use of it. It's very easy, especially in markets like that aren't understood well by the lay people, that aren't particularly controlled in a lot of ways, not a lot of oversight, that you can have a lot of shenanigans happen. And that doesn't necessarily say anything about the technology itself, which is obviously has a lot of use. It's really difficult to balance savings with spending money that is quickly decreasing in value, inflating. Yeah, and especially because I still think, and everything I've seen still supports this, that I think we'll have some kind of very significant deflation, or more accurately described as depressionary forces kick in before they really pivot and turn on the printing presses. Because right now we're still going through the same process, the same historical process by which, inflation can occur. There has to actually be lending. There has to be interest rate changes and things like that. So without something significantly changing, like direct Fed, purchasing debt or monetization, as they call it, directly, we couldn't really have some massive hyperinflation because of the way the money is normally created. You would actually need regular lending. You need buyers of U.S. Treasuries and that sort of thing to create that much money. So you can have deflation when in a debt-based money like ours, because you can actually have an incredibly fast implosion of collapse, because the money will just literally disappear as debt is defaulted on or even paid off. And as economic activity slows, that becomes more and more likely. My thesis has always been that when that happens, they won't want to tolerate that. So the alternative will be to switch it, crank up the printing presses, find out the more creative quasi-legal, or just change the laws on how the money works, whatever, or just do direct monetization of the debt by the Fed and just crank up the printing presses, because the alternative is that money all disappears. And I've said this 100 times, but it just is impossible to me to envision the government being like, sorry, the money's disappearing in a debt spiral. We're not going to be paying police. We're not going to be paying Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, welfare. We're not going to be paying the politicians. We're not going to be paying the military. We're not going to be making bombs, because the money's just all disappearing. And there isn't any. It's not going to happen. This is literally not going to happen. If it did, then we're talking worst case scenario, like total collapse. So that's not what they're going to do. So they're going to do what every other country's always done in that situation, come up with ways to just make more money that becomes increasingly less worthwhile. But like SBQR is saying, now it puts you in a weird position, because it's very likely that cash will become very useful and actually momentarily increase in value. Maybe the US dollar could strengthen momentarily when we have that kind of deflationary or depression, because there'll be fewer of them. And especially if anything weird's happening overseas, people momentarily fleeing the dollar. So it's not just going to be like a steady, only down trajectory as we lose reserve currency status. We could see momentary time where it becomes more valuable. And I actually think that's probably likely. So you want to have some cash on hand. But when it switches, or if it happens to switch first, like if they really see this coming and decide they don't want to deal with that and decide to turn on the spigots earlier and go into quantitative easing before that type of thing happens, then the cash will be basically worthless. So it's a really weird spot where we can have to be careful, because you can get screwed either way. And diversity is usually the best bet, not a financial planner. And if you're like me, you have like $14 to worry about what you do with it anyway. I heard Zach says, I heard a purpose say something like, if you think food is going to cost a lot more in the future, then stock up now. And that goes for anything. Obviously, if you think something's going to become more expensive, then why wouldn't you buy more of it if it stores? And you have to be careful, because if you end up wasting it because it doesn't doesn't last, then you haven't saved anything. Okay, Dorwell says, some people are predicting the Great Reset will start later this year. Does that sound about right? I mean, I never look at these things as like an event. Like we are in the reset, we're in the collapse, whatever. We're in the, like I said, these things that take decades. The decade started decades ago. So this is going to be hard. Maybe looking back in 50 years, you'll be able to say, like, like when people were alive and Archduke Franz Ferdinand, or not Franz Ferdinand, was it Franz Ferdinand? Archduke Ferdinand got shot. People weren't like, oh, that's it, that's World War I. You know what I mean? They just see all these crazy things happening and it slowly builds. And that's the stage we're in now, where when looking back in 50 years, people are going to say, this was the collapse of the currency. This was World War III, whatever. But pinpointing when you're in it, the exact incident and dates is not only difficult, it's kind of pointless. So it started now, like I said, like this shit is happening now. So later this year, I think we'll see more stuff happening. And I know one of the guys at Canadian Prepper was talking to recently, was talking about how, I think Bob Moriarty, saying about how he thinks more is going to happen in the next 6 months than have happened in the last 50 years. I don't know, even though that's my instinct, it always feels to me like stuff happens a little bit slower than I think, because I think I see these things so far out where this could end up. I'm very good at like projecting what if type scenarios, like, well, if this, then this, that I can see how this could happen so far out. I was making videos 10 years ago. So I always feel like it's going to happen sooner, but it usually takes longer than I think. So if I feel like it's going to happen in the next 6 months, it's probably going to happen within the next 3 to 5 years. But who knows? So much could happen. So much has happened past few months. In Dauphine, Manitoba, an hour away from me, they had UBI in place for 15 years. It was a success, and Trudeau finally came out last year commenting on how our government is going to roll out UBI here. I mean, that's coming, especially if we're in UBI, for those of you who don't know, is universal basic income, some sort of money that you just get from the government from being a citizen. And that I definitely have predicted always that that's going to happen, especially if they try to switch to some sort of digital currency, or when they do. I think that'll be the easiest way for them to get everybody wrapped up in it, is to say, it's all free money, like stimulus. They might call it stimulus, they might call it whatever, who knows. But free money, sign up here to get it. You'll get 99% of the people on that program instantaneously. Furry Tree Dweller says, Eric, how about discussing martial law? U.S. currency is supposed to be no good by July. I haven't heard that. I mean, I certainly don't think that's going to happen. City Prepping said economic collapse is top reason martial law implemented. I kind of don't disagree. I kind of disagree with that, simply because economic collapse is going to be when it's they're having currency issues. And like I said, if they're running out of money, or if they're having all sorts of weird issues, anytime there's going to be a lot of violence, then you could have a lot of government force. Now, martial law specifically, like JJ's talked about, I think that term is kind of overused, because it's specifically when the control is given to the military. I think there will be, and in normal operations, I think there will be very drastic, draconian crackdowns by the government that won't, technically speaking, be martial law. And I think a lot of that's going to happen. And I only think martial law would usually happen in some sort of like major grid down type scenario, or like if there was a pandemic of a disease that really was killing 50, 90% of people, and they really just had to shut everything down. But in terms of just weird economic collapse types of a country descending into shittiness, I think we'll just see states of emergency and more draconian normal police activity. It won't be the military per se. It'll just be the police. And yeah. And again, so martial law, there's not enough military, like JJ has also mentioned this. The country's too big, too spread out. They could never put the entire country under martial law. They could control city centers and stuff like that, and lock travel down in certain areas, but it just doesn't, it's not feasible to put the entire country under like true martial law. Taiwan is doomed. SA look and fend for themselves. Yeah, I mean, we spent too much money and time and effort playing world police, and we can't play world protector. We've given them insane amounts of arms and military support and money and everything. So having Americans go die over there, I don't think is, we should be building those semiconductors over here. And that's really the only reason that we would care about Taiwan, is Taiwan semiconductors. In historic colleges, $1 in hand temporarily becomes worth 10 locked up in the bank. Oh, and historic collapse. I don't know why I said college. Taiwan, another Afghanistan. I mean, it'll be even crazier if they actually go to hot war with them. Survivability said Austria is printing money and their inflation is rising too. Yeah, most places are. All the major normal, Western style countries that use, and even non-Western countries use this fiat debt-based central banking model. I heard last year that the digital dollar will be ready to roll out by this October. I mean, like I said, I don't focus on dates. We know they're going to try to do this stuff. The Fed now system is rolling out in July, I believe. That's not a CBDC per se, but it's definitely a precursor to it, them testing the technology. I think we should have given Taiwan some of the federal land in the U.S. states, and they can move all their manufacturing over here. Well, yeah, I mean, we should be doing this manufacturing, and I know Intel is used to be doing that. I mean, they still do it, but they're behind Taiwan basically in a lot of the super high-end stuff. But if the Taiwan gets blockaded, then Intel stock should be doing pretty well, because they're really the only one. They're definitely back to being on top. Thoughts on the insanity of AI? Yeah, it's crazy. The scariest thing to me about the AI so far is how it's being, I don't even want to say restrained, but how it's being controlled to do certain things. It isn't this like free entity. It's become this like moralizing, definitely biased because of how it's trained. So that's the scariest part to me, is knowing that you're never going to be just, even if they create this AI, you're probably not going to have access to the unfettered abilities that it could have you're going to be getting this weird trained version of it that's even scarier because it can allow them to enforce all their ideological decisions. Anyone who's making extremely specific predictions is very likely going to be wrong. The clouds will be tipping down steps, not falling off a cliff. Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't matter. Like there's no reason to take something that it's pretty easy to be right about and make yourself wrong about it by making it a specific date. And not just for ego and reputation, but for, actually your preparations. Like saying the stock market is going to go up significantly over the next 3 years. That's actionable enough. That's specific enough to be actionable and to make money off that. But if you went out and bought a specific option, like a call that was the stock market's going to get to X number by this date, you could lose everything. You could still be you could be right about the general trend of the market going up, maybe even the sector, maybe even the same stock, and still lose all your money if you try to pick a specific price by a specific date and put it all on some kind of options play. So I think that's a lot of what you see. You don't want to have that happen with your preps either and be like, China will go to war with Taiwan by the end of this year. Okay. How about we're going to see continued tensions all across the various areas in the world, Middle East, Asia, Russia, not put a date on it, not put a specific event that has to happen for your monetary decisions or your preps to be right. So start with as broad a kind of prediction as you can, and then just make it just specific enough that it becomes actionable, and then work from there. Because trying to be too specific, you can actually make yourself lose, even though you're generally speaking right. Especially when it comes to stuff that you do with your money. When it comes to preps, you're a little better off because we do have that commonality of preparedness, where if anything you do to be prepared, it's going to be useful under a lot of different scenarios, regardless, even if it wasn't the best possible thing you could have done. But there's still no reason to try to pigeonhole yourself into these like weird specifics. You want to be ready for stuff. And if you see something that makes you think that something's going to happen by a date, get your stuff in order more quickly than maybe you would have otherwise. But it's so rare that there's so many variables, so many different things, so much bogus information or misinterpreted information. Like there's so many different ways to be wrong that you don't want to be specific as you want to be as generic as possible with your predictions and your preps, because it's so easy to be wrong when the more specific you get. We had 25 years of high inflation with 7 years of hyperinflation between 1997 in Brazil. It's horrible. People soldier on, life goes on. Yeah. And that's not always the case, but like I said, there's been some crazy stuff happening in a lot of countries over, the last few hundred years. And we still really don't see the type of like epic movie prepper mind collapses that we like to talk about sometimes, which is good. I mean, all humans have a vested interest in society maintaining some semblance of structure and continuity. And so it really takes a lot to completely disrupt that, but things will get shittier for sure. Steve Violent says, I would respectfully disagree. I'm not sure what part or what comment. The media and government did a good job covering up the gun grabs during the aftermath of Katrina. I'm not sure which comment that was referring to. I just got finished watching a video by RHL talking about the cameras in Walmart. There will be AI cameras which watch for shoplifting. Yeah, I mean, and people, even the AI term, like I said, that's just kind of misused a lot too. A lot of times people just are, when they talk about AI, it's just an algorithm, which strictly speaking isn't artificial intelligence. Even a lot of the people claim, Chat GPT isn't true AI. It's just like a language processing or a language model, or I forget what the term they use, but it kind of is irrelevant to what we're talking about here when you're talking about computers making the decisions. That's really what we're talking about. It's computers making the decisions, not people, and them doing it, learning to do it faster, and eventually learning to make decisions based on their own decisions and maybe even improving themselves. But like simple algorithms aren't necessarily the same thing as artificial intelligence. But it's all for the same purposes. Digital dollar and devaluation is already happening. My family in Mexico are saying that the peso to dollar conversion went from 24 pesos to now it's 18 to 1. So it's actually strengthened, right? So I guess that's good for the people who have pesos. Yeah, we're going to see a lot of like perturbations and weirdness in the currency markets. And like I said, it's not all going to be in one direction. There's a lot of stuff that could happen to make the dollar strengthen against other fiat currencies, but it's all within the context of it still being the dominant reserve currency. And we may even be a time that it's just that there's competing reserve currencies. People haven't 100% ditched the dollar yet, but it's just, now there's some other options out there. It might not be all at once. I tend to think that once there's other better options, it'll happen pretty quick. Because that's really all the dollar has, is that it is that option. There's really not a lot of other advantages to it. But, there's still a ton floating out. People have a lot of money in dollars, in dollar assets, in physical US money, things like that. So it could hang on a little bit longer than maybe we even think, even after the alternatives show up. But that's definitely, the days are numbered. It's just a matter of time. That's the big takeaway. There's no way China can take Taiwan easily anyway. There's only 2 months into the year that Taiwan Strait is common enough to cross with a large fleet. Yeah, but we don't know what, like I said, if they start true blockades and to stop everything from going in, they're not necessarily, there's a lot of possibilities of them, options that they have that wouldn't involve them physically trying to invade, because that could be extremely costly. We have built up Taiwan's military pretty extensively, but they might just try to do a war of attrition. They might try to make some sort of deal with them, say, you're officially China, but you get to keep this autonomy like Hong Kong. And if they can get us to back off, that would be the main thing, because then China will know, or Taiwan, will know that it's just a matter of time. Similar to with the Ukraine and Russia, like Taiwan is in a position because of us and what we've given them. They could put up a hell of a fight, most likely, but without us backing them up, in addition to what they already have, there's zero chance that they would win. They could make it very expensive and painful for China, but there's no chance that they could ever win without the U.S. actively fighting China as well. Even with like the Ukraine type situation, plus giving money and stuff, it's written. There's no way that they would ever win. And the fighting in and of itself would have the same effect, because like they would not be shipping they would not be manufacturing the semiconductors. They would not be shipping them. That stuff would all stop from day one for the most part, of any massive, hot conflict there. So it wouldn't matter, like if they're winning, losing, like just maintaining. They still wouldn't be. Their manufacturing, everything would still probably be to a complete halt. Let's see. It says all the chip making equipment requires parts from Europe and USA. So China taking Taiwan gets them nothing once the equipment breaks down. Chip factories and all. Yeah, true. And that's what I was just talking about, that it would just all stop. And they might eventually be able to get it back up and running eventually, but it would stop for us too. We would have to start making all that stuff too. And I don't think that the chips are the 100% the reason. Obviously, it's very important to them for just their pride, ideology, nationalism, whatever you want to call it. They think that Taiwan is China, and they're willing to do a lot to defend that. If you haven't watched the show Jericho from CBS, it showed the government would use private contractors. The DHS seemed to become too tyrannical. Yeah, I mean, the government uses private contractors for all sorts of stuff. I don't necessarily think that shows will show what the government would really do in real life, but I mean, we do know they use contractors for all sorts of stuff. I mean, Russia's using PMCs with the Wagner Group. So we know that's just a reality of the modern world. I don't think that really necessarily changes much about like what's actually going to happen. But you guys got any more questions? I guess Dan and Shay might not be able to make it. Hopefully they'll drop in soon. It's just me. Sorry, you guys. Get to look at my ugly mug. I'm getting old now too, so had to get my Clark Kent's so I can read your guys' comments. What do you think? My disguise works. The gray man, I can go full gray man. They beat the BCGs that you get in the Army, right? Which I never had to worry about, because back then I didn't have any issues. For those of you who don't know, the BCGs were the glasses that they're kind of like the prison chomo glasses they give you when you get to basic training. And they're so hideous, they called them birth control glasses, because they prevent you from having any interaction with the opposite sex. Because they're just these weird like strap-on things. You're supposed to be tough. So these are the Clark Kents, though. These aren't the BCGs. I realized I needed these when I was playing poker. And I'd be like, wow, two queens. And they're like, that's king queen. And I'm like, oh, right, of course. Like I can't sit in a 1 or the 9 seat anymore. I need like right in the middle. Like, yeah, birth control glasses or goggles. Yep, BCGs. These are the Clark Kents. Different class. Do I look like Shay? He's a little more tan than me, man. I got to work on my color. The sun, look at that. Whiter than the sheet of paper. Not too different. Chris V says, rare that I catch your live streams with you or the whole crew. Last time I was able to was on the steady was 2 years ago. Wow. Well, glad you could make this one. But like I leave them all up there so you guys can always have the opportunity to watch them if you can't catch them live. So that's still cool. Everyone has the opportunity to participate. So have you guys noticed, heard anything in the news about the dollar reserve currency that I haven't mentioned? Because that's the stuff that I'm focusing on right now. That and China. I think the Russia stuff, to me, it's pretty much a done deal in terms of the eventuality of it. There's a lot of weird stuff that's going to happen in the meantime. Like I was mentioning, I really expected to see a pretty significant push by the Ukrainians that the Russians seem to be preparing for as well. With some trenches they were digging in pretty far behind their current line. So they were prepared to have to fall back quite a bit. But then it seems like everything might have stalled with this these info leaks that came out. And like I said, I think a lot of countries were pissed off at, seeing how much the U.S. is spying on them and their own allies and stuff too. So here we have an article from Barron's right now. It just came out yesterday that says, oh, I got to subscribe. I hate paywalls. God damn it, these people. Continue reading this article with a Barron subscription. How about I give you the finger and I go read another one that doesn't have a paywall? That's my deal. Business Insider. Is the dollar dying? Let's see if they have a paywall. No, Business Insider it is. Is the dollar dying? Its reserve currency status may be at risk. This is today. Actually, it's tomorrow. It says April 17th. It must be published somewhere other than the US. Or I'm just giving you guys a glimpse into the future. Is the dollar dying? Its reserve currency status may be at risk. It isn't time to die. That's a weirdly written sentence. Its reserve currency status may be at risk. It should have like a while in there. While its reserve currency status may be at risk, it isn't time to die. We'll see. So this is a Business Insider. The reign of the dollar as the world reserve currency is under increasing scrutiny as countries prepare ground to reduce their reliance on the whims of U.S. monetary and foreign policy. Amongst the countries which have moved against the dollar in some capacity include Russia, China, India, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil. Only billions of people. Just a couple billion. No big deal. Just 2.5, almost 3 billion people, right? China and India together have about almost 3 billion people. I mean, it's Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Russia, South Africa is usually included in that group as well. Saudi Arabia is a big one because they were the, integral in creating the reserve currency or petrodollar status to begin with by saying that we're going to only trade oil. And so that's a pretty big one in terms of symbolism. The world is going through an upheaval on multiple fronts, many of which lead to the U.S.'s unchecked unipolar supremacy being challenged, and by extension, the dollar's primacy as the world's reserve currency. Yep. Yeah, this is just kind of superficial explanation of what we've already been talking about. Let's see what else you guys got. Look, the guy from Sicario with the glasses on. Which one? The guy with the stash? The operator who's in what was that guy's name? The guy from Burn Notice, right? It's the actor's name. Jeffrey Donovan. Yeah, that's him. I'll take it. I see inflation being the biggest issue for the next few years, maybe some local shortages of some food. Yeah, and because like I've said before, is that the production of food and stuff and other things in the US, we have all these resources. That doesn't mean that it'll end up in US grocery stores. If there's a lot of other shortages that could make transporting it hard, preserving it hard, packaging it, whatever. And then beyond that, if the currency weakens, there'll be other places that are willing to pay a lot more for it. Similar to how we can come in and pay, buy coffee from some shit country that we can pay way more than what the guy down the street who's actually harvesting and growing the shit could afford to pay for it because we're like, 50 cents, dollar, whatever. It doesn't make a difference to me. Whereas to them, that's like their entire day's wages, that little bit of difference. And that could happen to our currency. Similarly, like to how people have mentioned in the Irish potato famine, it wasn't really because the potatoes weren't there, but they were because of the realities of the economic situation. They would be being sold elsewhere for more money than they could afford locally. China has 1 air refueling squadrons. 1. Okay. China's or Taiwan's not that far away. They don't need to do too much air refueling, probably. They'll be doing it mostly. I don't think a lot of people don't seem to realize how much just chaos would be caused by this conflict happening at all. Like I said, like Taiwan can definitely put up a good fight with the pretty substantial military capabilities that we've built them up with over the years, but any conflict starts over there, and you're going to see all sorts of weird shit that you never even think of being a problem, being a massive problem. Look at how much disruptions we had from that stupid ship turning sideways in like the Suez Canal or whatever it was for like a week. That was one damn ship stopping, and then talking about everything going by Taiwan and coming on China deciding they don't want to ship this stuff anymore. Like, come on, man, it would just be chaos. Even if they didn't even start shooting at each other yet. 21-year-old wouldn't have the TSCCI security clearance at his age and rank. I mean, it depends. Everything's so much more digital now. I knew I can't speak specifically about a 21-year-old, and I don't even know what this kid's rank was, but there were plenty of young guys that we dealt with that top secret security clearance. And I don't know if this stuff was technically considered top secret or just secret. I know that every officer has secret security clearance, and I was an officer that young when you graduate, if you go through RTC and whatever. And so yeah, we had a lot of kids that had top secret clearance, maybe not 21. And like I said, I don't know what that kid's rank was, but it doesn't seem surprising to me. Oh yeah, he did say it's top secret security clearance. I don't think that's universal. And like I said, I'm sure with everything is so digital now, they probably had to expand. I've been out for years now, but they probably had to expand the number of people that at some stage have access to this stuff. But I mean, I don't know so you're just saying you think that that's fake, that they just picked some random kid and throwing him in prison for this? I don't think we are in the clear yet in regards to the smaller regional banks going there. Definitely not. That's going to continue to get worse. In fact, that they might not even want to stop that. I think they'd be very happy with seeing consolidation into like less than 10 major banks that do everything. Kind of random point, SPQR says, but in the multiple civilizational collapses that occurred in the Mediterranean area, urban centers depopulated 50-90%, something to keep in mind if you live in a city. Yeah. And some of that was probably related, or most was probably related to flight, a lot of it related to debts. Most Brazilians are not happy with this alliance with the Eurasian dictatorships. We had shenanigans last year with the Poles. Yeah, that was getting weird. The real alliance would be RICS without us. Perhaps, but we'll see what happens. My dad was a gunnery sergeant in the Marines, ground radio tech, had secrets clearance. Yeah, I mean, the secret and top secret are not the same specifically, so I couldn't say, especially I was never in the Air Force either, and that kid was Air Force, wasn't he? Well, homesteading, Rico says that's why homesteading is the best answer. Just being resilient and being able to produce, whether or not you want to call that homesteading or any element of it. Yeah, I think honestly, being like having a farm or something is probably the best bet. But it depends on where you are, you might have to leave. Depends on what state and area you're in too. It doesn't make you invincible, but it's definitely a good way to make yourself way more resilient. So we've been going for about 45 minutes. So just let me know if you guys have any last minute questions. I feel like I'm kind of a little bit rambling. I didn't have great, I can't even think of words. So never mind. My brain is fried. It's all the chemtrails or whatever they're spraying. So if you guys have any last minute questions, Otherwise, I'm going to go. I only got to go to the range today. It'd been too long. Worst come to worst, USA has 8,000 pounds of gold. Could it even make a difference? It depends. First of all, a lot of people think we don't really have it. Don't know enough to comment on that. I know the government lies about pretty much everything, so it wouldn't surprise me. And it depends on in what context. So if it just talks about like at current prices selling the gold, no, that wouldn't make a dent. But if someone does decide to make a gold-backed currency, then yeah, it could make a dent. Range, if this was an indoor range, it went good. Definitely need to go more often. Still doing, just like in most things, I'm still doing good enough to not embarrass myself, but not good enough to impress anyone, enough to get the job done. But I have a video, or I'm planning on trying to do a video soon out in the desert. I have a bunch of things I want to do. And one of the ones I want to do, a drill, is if you guys have seen Escape from LA, which is one of the greatest movies of all time. He does the Bangkok rules. So I'm not going to explain it if you haven't seen the movie, but I'm going to do a Bangkok rules drill with 4 targets. I'm only going to use one gun, though. He uses 2 guns that are fully automatic. I'm just going to use 1 gun. That's probably the problem. I haven't smelled burning cordite for a while. Yeah, right? Need to. You get stupid if you haven't smelled the gunpowder. I was thinking, too, while I was there, it's like, you see all these rich people with indoor bowling alleys? Hell with that. I would have an indoor firing range if I had any kind of serious mansion money. Probably be even cheaper than a bowling alley. So I also got to do the Dickens drill when I go to the desert. I haven't tried that one yet. And because I was watching some video, I think it was Active Self-Protection. And I really like that channel. It's a great channel. But he was talking about how he was ragging on the LCP, which LCP is one of the 2 main guns that I carry, simply because I'm really trying now to carry like every time I go outside, almost like out of the house. And there's a lot of times where it's problematic to carry anything larger than that. And especially when it's a low risk situation that also is going to be hard to carry a larger gun, even a small but still larger gun, it's still better than nothing. But he was saying something on that channel about like a real world is an open class, so you can carry whatever you want. And he called the LCPs little crappy pistols. And it hurt my feelings. So I'm gonna have to go do it with the LCP, because I'm actually pretty accurate at the LCP. The sight picture I get on those, you hit what I'm shooting at. Yes, it's just a 380, but it's enough to. Here we go. We got one right here. Wouldn't want that punching me in the head. And it's still better than nothing. So I'll try to do Dickens. I don't know if I can hit 40 yards though with it. So that's what we're gonna see. Because the Dickens drill, for those of you who don't know, is that defensive shooting that was in Ohio, I believe, maybe Indiana, where they had just done permitless carry, and it was like this 21 or 20-year-old kid stopped the mall shooter, 10 out of 10 shots from estimated 40 yards. That's in like 10 seconds, I think, or 15 seconds. Do you think an airsoft gun is useful for learning drawing techniques and trigger control? Sure, if it's the same gun, same weight, same trigger pull and everything. I think it'd be much better to, getting sight pictures, stuff like that. It's probably gonna be better, like doing your manipulations. You could probably get pretty good using airsoft. The trigger is going to be different, probably. I don't have a lot of experience in airsoft. I know in size and weight and everything, they're basically exact copies. I don't know about like trigger pull and stuff like that. You can get snap caps if you really want to practice your trigger release. But in terms of manipulations, magazine swaps, stuff like that, you can for sure get better at it doing that. I saw a video one time where they took this, I think he was a Japanese guy who had, they don't have the gun culture over there that we do here. And he had like never used a real weapon before, but he was like an airsoft master, like typical Asian style, doing everything flawlessly. And they threw him out on the range with a real gun, and he was extremely good. Maybe not as good as he would have been with using the real gun the entire time, but he was like top tier in terms of magazine changes, getting the shot off quick. You probably just have to work on accuracy, and the gun's going to move a lot more with a real bullet than with an airsoft. So regaining sight picture, your follow-on shots would probably be the biggest difference. But look up that video; it's pretty funny. Say airsoft guy tries gun for the first time or something like that. Tries real gun for the first time. Can you recommend a good 5.56 or 9mm round? I mean, that just depends on what you're going for. Like there are certain things I got weird boxes here sitting on my. So you got some weird stuff like this is 380, but Liberty Civil Defense 9 mil. They're extremely lightweight, extremely high velocity to the point where like your uh path, like your trajectory is different. So you'll actually have a different aim point. So you'll have to sight in your gun specifically for the Liberty Civil Defense. But they're like a machined bullet. They're not lead, and they're extremely fast and they're super lightweight. Like the boxes, when you pick up the whole box, it feels like it's empty or half empty compared to regular lead bullets. But they'll actually, the 9 mm ones will punch through um, regular level 3 body armor. The Safe Life has their level 3A plus that prevents against it, but regular other companies and just regular level 3A will punch through it. I like the Quantity Critical Defense and the Winchester Defender, I think is the other one that seemed to work well. And the ones I've really been intrigued with looking at are the non-expanding hollow points. They're not even really hollow points. They're just these weird wave shape to the bullet. So it doesn't have a problem of penetration that some hollow points do, or getting like stuffed up with jacket material or everything, but it creates an even bigger like wound channel just because of like fluid dynamics in the shape of the bullet. But yeah, I agree that why says it's better to learn what makes ammo variety different and select what you want. And also an important part of that is to shoot it, because they'll feel different. And more importantly, some guns will just like certain ammo better. Like just the shape of the bullet at the end is different, the weights are different, and for whatever reason, your particular firearm might have twice as much cycling issues with one type of ammo as it does with another. And you don't, even if it's like 2 out of 1,000 instead of 1 out of 1,000, like there's no reason to put up with that if you can find an ammo that works better. And like I said, you just might hit better with one. And I don't think most of these that I've mentioned, if you get real self-defense ammo, not just FMJ, whatever, you're going to have pretty good results with all of it, to the point where hitting and being more accurate with it is going to be more important. Why says critical defense? I don't know why I have a bunch of ammo just sitting on my desk right now, but I don't care really about the price of self-defense ammo, because I just don't shoot that much of it. You should always shoot a couple magazines of that, just to make sure that it's not way different than your training ammo, to make sure your gun cycles it and stuff like that. But I don't just go to the range and shoot 100 rounds or 300 rounds of critical defense. So I did get a couple magazines worth, cycle through 1 or 2 mags every time I go to the range. And so if it's $2 a bullet or whatever, I don't really care if I think it's going to be better. I want to see a series of short videos on the various drills you recommend. Go for it. Absolutely. I plan on doing that. I'm traveling this next week, but that's one of the things I hope, or not hope, but I'm going to do when I get back. So I'll probably just do a range day, film a bunch of different drills, and then make individual video on each one that I actually just filmed at the same time. So, because I need to practice too. And I have some guns that I have the scopes that I haven't even sighted in properly yet. So I got a PA-10, which is awesome. And I can't wait to get out there and try that thing with a variable power scope, which I have very little experience with using. So I want to see what that feels like. G9 external hollow, is that the one I'm thinking of? Yeah, the external hollow points. I think some of them are called non-expanding too, or FTX, I think is the brand, FDX, something like that. Creates a spiral fluid the way that carves a 1-inch hole in its wound. Yeah, they're incredibly destructive, and they also have good penetration. So you get like the best of both worlds. They're still pretty lightweight bullet too, because of like the fluting shapes cut out of it. And yeah, but I haven't shot them yet. So I really like what I've seen from all those external hollow points, but I have not shot them yet. And yes, in shit the fan, any ammo is better than none. Like, yeah, if you have regular FMJ, obviously it's going to get the job done still. Like you're talking about a marginal difference. Like if you're dropping any amount of copper jacketed lead into various things, and also for some uses, you want like a full J. You don't just want hollow points all the time. Like most of what I have for the AR is green tip, M88 ball, or M88. Why can't I never remember numbers? M886. Is that it? Why am I not remembering what it is? The M855, yeah, whatever. I can't remember numbers. Um, sorry, got caught up. But yeah, my brain shut off again. I don't know what it is. Propane powered airsoft. Interesting. George says, yes, they do. I used to play airsoft with the higher priced ones that use propane. Nowadays, you can get them in high powered. I don't think I'd be comfortable using a propane powered gun. It'll blow up on me. Stinky too, right? Every time you shoot shot off, it smells like someone farted. Pretty wild. SPQR says I did some rapid deployment drills, could set random timers on your phone to surprise you. I did terrible. It took me 15 seconds to bring a weapon out. Yeah, that's rough. But I'd probably be at the same right now if you're just like, that's actually not a bad idea. If you're going to be around your property, you don't necessarily want to be in like the squeezing an avocado and Albertson and be like beep beep beep, and then like pointing around. But because I was just talking with a friend today about when we went shooting that I was like I'm more interested. Obviously, accuracy is hugely important, but if you're within a threshold, like if I have a grouping at 7 yards or whatever, I'd be more interested in improving my like speed, getting like my first shot off quicker, getting multiple targets, things like the draw and looking around and all that stuff. I'd be more worried about improving that than I would be about getting my 4-inch grouping into a 2-inch grouping or whatever. Because as long as you're already hitting the target, identifying the threat, getting the gun out and getting that first shot off quicker, like that stuff's going to be a lot more important than the absolute size of your grouping once you're already past a certain accuracy threshold. If you're already winging the ceiling and hitting the clips and digging them into the ground and everything, then yes, accuracy is the first, because if you're not hitting it, it doesn't matter. But once you're within a point where like obviously these are all within the thoracic triangle at 7 yards or whatever, do you need to be hollowing out a dime? Be nice. It's going to be better than not being that accurate, but it's not as important as the other real elements of what would happen. Like if your first shot is always off, or you make your shots are totally perfect, but only when you're standing there with one eye closed in a controlled environment, then that's not necessarily as realistic or as useful type of accuracy. 500 feet per second airsoft would most likely hurt almost as bad as simunitions. I've talked to guys who've taken hits. They say it's no fun. Yeah, I've done simunitions. I honestly didn't get shot that much with them. Maybe I'm just awesome. And it hurts, but it wasn't like brutal. It's like when someone's got a paintball gun like cranked too high and you're just like, I get a little bruise, you know what I mean? But it was nothing to cry about. Yeah, exactly. So once you brush up on the basics, no one super slowly fires in a real shootout. And not only the rate of fire, but like for me, that first shot, like getting up, getting the sight picture and getting the first shot on target is what's most important. And then follow-up shots are going to be like if you miss that first shot, then you don't even know too. First of all, like when you're shooting a self-defense situation, you don't even know if that first shot hit necessarily. Guy might still be moving, all this other stuff. So you have to make sure that your first shot and follow-up shots are actually working within a good you have to be confident in that and to be able to do it at speed and stuff like dealing with jams, corrective actions. If you don't train for that stuff, it's like, you don't want to have to be like sitting there shaking, dealing weird stuff, pull out a cleaning rod. And so that's one of the things, like I said, the ammo is important. Like if you notice that your gun just doesn't like one type of ammo for some reason, and it could be something as simple as like a magazine. Like maybe this one magazine doesn't. And that's why another thing why practice is important is like, you know what, fuck this magazine. Every time that one has feed issues. Maybe it's seated a little bit crooked, the spring's a little too weak or too strong or whatever. And that's the stuff that you can only find out when you're actually using them. 500 FPS simunitions. Yeah, we did use a simunition. It's like a little chalk lump. And I remember it like, I remember not being really, I don't want to say impressed, but it wasn't noteworthy to me. I guess I was expecting it to hurt a lot. So it didn't like rock my world. But I've only done that. It was like one day we did simunitions, I think, in BOLC or basic officer leadership course. And It was fun because they're like actual real little bullets, and we had like a fake village we were running around in, smoke bombs and stuff. Pretty cool. Yeah, we had it wasn't really CQB per se, but we did have it was like buildings. Most of the time we were outside with a little bit inside the buildings, but is that an EPS in the shelf behind you? You recommend it? EPS? Which one? What are you looking at? I've got the Hollow Sun up here, if that's what you're talking about. Or are you talking about my camera? This is EOS. That's what I use for all my power equals mass times velocity. Sir, we don't do math here. We do not do that here. Quick maths only. Yeah, velocity is very destructive. That's why the civil liberty civil defense is so can like defeat body armor, even if it's just off the shelf 9mm. This is the Hollow Sun 509. And for those, if you guys can tell, I don't have my Glock. Oh yeah, I do. I have a Glock 45. So, and this is the not a 45 caliber, it's the 45. So it's like the 19X, but not the military version of it. So I want to put it on that, but I can't find a place to get the RMR cut 5th gen slides that aren't like mail it in to get machined by some dwarf in space or whatever and cost $700, like more than buying an entirely new gun. So if you guys know anywhere you can get some RMR cut 5th gen, I guess it's the slide for the 17 because the Glock 45 has just a Glock 17 slide, 5th gen RMR cut slide. Let me know. Would the government come after guns if America adopted it? I mean, they're trying to come after them anyway. I don't think it'll be specifically worse. They may try to do the thing that like the banks are doing, but it's going to be harder. You know, anytime if it's a government central bank digital currency, obviously they're bound by the Second Amendment as well. So, and that's thank God it's the one area that we've actually in politics we've actually been able to make some progress, mostly at the state level. So that's why that stuff's important. But someone is like, if you look back at even the concealed carry, like shall issue maps, we have had massive improvements since like 1995, and specifically over the past few years. And we're working towards we might even get the nationwide reciprocity. So like the gun rights are like literally the only area that we're holding strong. So do not ever back down on that fight because we are actually getting some progress there. I do not have any memes today. Sorry, I said that in the very beginning that I don't have. I tend to do like dumps, so I only have like one or two stragglers, and I have to because I get them on my phone and then my email, and then like I have to consolidate them all into the folder on the computer to actually show you guys. And I didn't do that in time today. But I'm probably going to wrap it up, guys, unless you can tell me in the next few minutes where I can get my RMR slide. But I also have some 80% receivers. So I think I just might get the parts kit for them with the RMR and not mess with this one because I have the receiver kits for the Glock 19s clones. So I might just get a Palmetto Armory, like the Dagger clone or whatever they make them. You can get Dagger clones with like threaded barrel, RMR cut slide, co-witness sights, like $399. And or it's like $600 and it includes the Hollow Sun. And I'm like, damn. Like I got like 3-4 guns I got sitting around that I never use. I might just sell one of those and pick up one of those. It's not a bad deal. And like I said, I think that Palmetto Armory is like they're like, they're not the poverty tier, but they are the cheap option, but they are solid, man. It's for the price. I don't think you can beat them. Isn't there a plate that mounts to the dovetail of the rear sight? Maybe. I haven't seen that, but that would be weird. So you're saying it would specifically like just mounts into this and then sits on top, but is only connected in the back? I wouldn't want to do that. That just seems weird to me. And also I don't have this is the I really like the G code stuff, but then I would have to get a different the cutout. I don't know if you can even use the active retention when you have a RMR sight on. Everything is eventually going to go barter, not to mention the black market will profit majorly. Always, there's always black markets. PSA has sexy smooth lowers. They have some good everything. But I actually have somewhere I have to be at 7:30. So I appreciate you guys. If you're not watching this live, tell me in the comments where I can get good parts kit with the RMR cut slide for a generic Glock 19 lower. Thanks for watching, guys. Keep prepping. And I will be, like I said, I've been bad about making videos on the channel, but I'm going to be gone for the next week out of town. And then I will be coming back and hopefully have some cool video for you. Well, not hopefully, definitely. Positivity. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will talk to you soon.